So hi, everybody. Maybe some of you, or definitely some of you, were at my 10-minute lightning talk yesterday. So this is just going to be a much more in-depth discussion on what Salience can actually do right now with Chinese, what it will be able to do. So first off, let's just go over the agenda a little bit. So we'll just recap some of what Seth already said, and we'll have some of the same slides for that too. On basic Salience functionality, how Salience processes text. Then we'll look at some unique challenges for Chinese in particular that we don't have for other languages. And then we'll go through a couple documents and actually process it in Salience. So we saw this earlier, the functionality. So with Chinese right now, we have themes, we have document details, which are n-grams, and n-grams are done at the character level instead of the word level, and I'll get into more detail about this later. We have sentiment. We don't yet have named entities, but that's on the way for the full release. Again, we've seen a slide earlier. Okay, so how does it work? Again, I'm going to get into more detail with this later, but we have an extra step. We have tokenization with Chinese. That's very different from most languages because we don't have spaces between words. Okay, so let's get to Chinese. Okay, so first off, I'm just going to go through some of these unique challenges that we have with Chinese. So the first is tokenization. Then I'm going to look at some of the character sets that we deal with. Quick note about Chengyu, just because I brought those up yesterday. And then stemming, which doesn't really exist as much in Chinese. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so there are no word boundaries in Chinese. Everything's glued together. So we can see in this blog entry, we have sentence boundaries with these periods, but everything's glued together as what looks like one word, although it's very much not. So the first step when we process text in Chinese is to separate this into words. So how do we know what's a word when there are no spaces? Okay, so here's an example of a sentence in Chinese. Okay, we don't really have this. So in Chinese, you know what a word is when you speak it, for the most part, but sometimes the word boundaries are a little bit fuzzy. And this is because, so in English, we know that a word's a word because we can see it on paper and we can say, oh yeah, there's a space there, there's a space there. And most words are their own semantic units, and we can all pretty much agree on where the word boundaries should be if we had to be put to the test. But an example like snowman, I actually don't even know, is that one word or two words? So that's one of the challenges that you have to deal with Chinese is there's a lot of fuzzy word boundaries. And sometimes separating them into words, you can get different segmentations and still justifiably say each one is correct. Okay, so Salience takes raw unformatted text like this one, segments it into words. Voila. Okay. Okay, so we have these. So we have, this is old topic, China exists, inflation risks, but not necessarily not controllable. So I tried to give the most literal translation of all of the words, and then you can get something a little bit more fluent if you're a translator. And then after that, we part-of-speech tag it. Part-of-speech tagging is very similar to what we do for other languages. There's a few modifications for the tag set because there's things in Chinese that just don't exist in English or other languages. And you'll see, for example, this one right here. It's a measure word. Measure words are everywhere in Chinese, and they come before nouns. And historically, they tend to have something to do with the type of noun it is. So there's a measure word that indicates that the thing is usually flat. There's another one for animals. And then this one here, ge, is the most common measure word. And if you don't know the measure word, just stick to that one and you'll be okay. So then, as you can see, we have adjectives, we have nouns, we have proper nouns, verbs, etc. But one thing you'll notice, and it's hard to tell here because it's only a single sentence, we don't have singular, plural distinctions. We don't have past tense, present tense, future tense. And it's not that these concepts don't exist in Chinese, but they're not explicitly written. So it's much more efficient in that sense. So, but harder for us to extract that data, because when there's nothing there, how do we actually say, okay, this is a singular or a plural noun? Fortunately, we don't have to deal with singular and plural right now, so that's not an issue. But let's look at, for example, China. China can be an adjective too, or it can be, actually that's not right. It can be a modifying noun, but we would still call it a noun. But it can come in an adjective position. But there's other cases. So for example, Fajan means to develop. And you can say, this country is developing, in which case it would be a verb. And you can use the same word to say, this country has seen a lot of development or progress, and it would be a noun. And it's very clear in English, I just use the different endings, but in Chinese it's the same word. So we have a lot of these words that cross part of speech boundaries, which makes it more challenging in Chinese. So just a note, Chinese language is somewhat ambiguous because there's many different dialects and languages that fall underneath that. But we're talking about Mandarin. Mandarin is the standard dialect in mainland China. For the most part, you see it on TV. For the most part, you can get around, even where the predominant language is something else, most people will know Mandarin. Another note, so Mandarin can be written with traditional characters, which look something like this, or look exactly like this, or simplified characters. Okay, so Salience can decipher both of these. Do you see? Look at that, yeah.
Well, if you look in the third line about after the comma, you see the difference.
Whoops. Yes, so, yeah, you can see it with this first word here. So this is America, and this is country. That was one of the first characters I ever learned. And they said at that point, do you want to learn traditional or simplified characters? You have to pick now. And I was like, but simplified is mainland China. Okay, so anything with mainland China, for the most part, you're going to be dealing with simplified, and I'd recommend you use simplified. They use traditional characters in Taiwan, and they also use it in Hong Kong, but in Hong Kong they speak Cantonese, which is different from Mandarin. And we do not handle Cantonese right now. They're not mutually intelligible, but mutually comprehensible, sorry. So that's something just to keep in mind. So you may have traditional characters, and as long as they're Mandarin traditional characters, Salience can handle that. Okay. So. Oh, I went all the way back, huh? Oh, I'm pressing the wrong button here. Okay. Okay. All right, so one of the questions we get a lot is, are there mixed character sets? And particularly, is there English in Chinese? And the answer is kind of no. Yes, you can see English here, but it's very much embedded within a Chinese grammar. And so the type of English we see in Chinese is often people names and also products, often having to do with technology. And the thing is, you tend to see both. So sometimes there's, so this right here, this is Microsoft, Weiran. But sometimes it's actually written Microsoft. Then you have Surface, so you can kind of get the idea. This is a company name, the Microsoft Surface here. Then this right here is BR Guides. So does anyone know what that is? BR Guides, so Bill Gates. And let's see, so Microsoft again. And then just to show you how inconsistent this is, so we have Bill Gates up here, it's all in Chinese, and then we have Warren Buffett, Warren Buffett, and then they actually put the English as well. So,
Looks like there's a delimiter character, that dot.
yes, this is exactly for foreign names. So if you have, especially in news data, if you have a first and a last name, they tend to put a dot between that. So that makes it really easy to extract those particular names. But that's not always the case. And yeah, so the point, another example I give is Google. I see that half and half. I see Google, which is the Chinese version, and then I see Google written in English. Same with Android, Android. So they kind of go back and forth. There's no, I don't see much rhyme or reason to it, just depending on the site you're on. And Salience can handle this fine. It sees these English tokens, and it's not going to say, okay, each letter is a character like in Chinese. I'm going to process this like it's a word in English. But then understand that it's within the framework of a Chinese grammar and process the grammar according to that. Yep.
Is there consolidation then? So I assume there's duplication between the English version and Warren Buffett in Chinese. So are those two consolidated?
Well, so
Topic, or-
we don't have named entities yet, but that would definitely make a lot of sense, and I'm sure that's something we'll do. Yeah, so I think right now we have a list file that actually takes, they don't consolidate them yet, but we have some translations with them so you can at least see which is which. But yeah, that's definitely something we want to keep in mind. I just have to bring up Chengyu because I brought them up yesterday and I made such a big deal out of them. So if you weren't here yesterday, so Chengyu tend to be 4 characters long, and they're single words, and they're idioms, and they tend to be very detailed sentiments, sometimes stories, if you remember that cat-mouse story yesterday. These are just 2 opposite sentiment Chengyus. And this is another way you can form Chengyus, just by taking elements of a word that convey a certain meaning and abbreviating them in a sense. So in this case, you have 喜眉笑颜. So 喜 is kind of like happy, and then 眉 is like your brow. 笑 is like to smile, laugh, and then 眼 is eyes. So it's like, that's 喜眉笑颜. And then 愁眉苦脸. So it's kind of like the opposite. So 愁 is like worry. 眉 again is brow. 苦 is like bitter. And 脸 is like your face. So it's kind of like, sad face. So this is just another facet of Chengyus. And there's so many different kinds. Yeah, go ahead.
How rapidly does Chengyu enter the language? Are they very traditional, or are they?
You can, if you're clever with the language, you can make them up yourself.
People recognize it as Chengyu as opposed to what is this?
Yeah, so there's something distinct about a Chengyu, and one of them is the fact that it's 4 characters long and it's kind of its own semantic unit. So it wouldn't, I guess you could kind of separate 喜眉, for example, the 2 separate words, but it doesn't really make sense because you're trying to convey this whole thought of, okay, my face is happy versus my face is sad. And due to the nature of the way you form words in Chinese tend to be bisyllabic, and these are kind of in a class of their own. I'll get into how many syllables Chinese words tend to be later on, but does that make sense to an extent? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so stemming. This is just brought up because it's not really something we have to deal with that much in Chinese at all, because it has a relatively poor morphology, which is a good thing if you're learning the language and not so great if you need to extract certain things from it. So the case I give, I actually studied in Beijing, and Beijing has this Erhuang, it's called, and you add it to the end of a lot of different words. And so they would actually teach us, like if you take a cab, this means the West Gate. So if I was going to my school, you could say Ximen, but in Beijing you would say Ximer. And you'd add this character, and this is kind of like a phonetic character. It just attaches onto the last one. But this is kind of one of the very few scenarios that you actually see a character changing the sound of the previous word or attaching onto it. Otherwise, they're their own syllabic units. So that's just one example of stemming. The other one is, sometimes you can add a ending men to the ends of certain nouns, but it's so rare, it would indicate a plural. Like I said before, you don't have to, singular and plural, they're usually the same word. Sometimes you can say like, Pengyo is friend, and you can be like, Pengyomen. And I'm talking about all you guys, and it's really emphasizing the plurality of it. So stemming's not a big issue in Chinese, that's the point I'm trying to make here. So maybe you've gotten a little idea of how different the writing system is in Chinese. And because of this, so in English we spell words, right? And they're phonetic, singular phonetic components. So when I say the letter A, that means nothing to you. It's just a sound. It could be A. In Chinese, it's very different. So you have to really approach the language differently. Every character has its own meaning. And when you form words, you're essentially taking different meanings and putting them together and subbing them out. It's not always that clean, but that's the foundation for forming words in Chinese. So I kind of love to show this short little demo of how this actually works. So this word here means middle. So the first character, zhong, is really middle. And then jian is like space. So this is the word for middle in terms of space. So I'm in the middle. But let's sub out the space character with this character. 中国, 国 is country or kingdom. So middle kingdom, what do you think that is? Yeah, exactly. So we can sub out the last character again. 文. 文 is like literature. So if you say 中文, does anyone have an idea what that might be? Knowing that 中国 is China, Middle Kingdom. When we sub out the 国, and we have, yes, exactly. Well, it could be Chinese literature, but it's more like 中文, the writing, Chinese writing. Can sub this out. 医, 中医. 医 is means like medical. So when we talk about 中医, it's Eastern medicine, so Chinese medicine. So we're back to 中国, China. Now we can sub out the other side. So 美. 美 is literally beautiful. 美国, what country do you think that is? I don't know if that's actually why it was called this. It's America. I think there could be an element of phonetics there. But hey, we'll take the beautiful country. That's fine. Sub it out again, we have 外, 外国. 外 means outside. So what do you think this would mean? Yeah, well, foreign country. Now we switch them around. 国外. So country outside of. So it's just like a way to say, I went outside of the country. You can use that word. Let's go back to 外国 and 中国. Okay, let's add a character. Let's add the character 人, which means people. Exactly. So, and this is actually interesting. Just going back to segmentation, how would we segment this? I mean, sure. Or you could segment it as one. I mean, how would you guys segment it? Any Chinese speakers? Yeah, so I mean, 2 words? Yeah, I mean, either case, it would be justifiably correct. In the end, you just have to pick one. And I believe in the data set we use, they segment it as 1 word. So that's the one we chose. But you can see that, yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious, I don't know how familiar you are with German morphology, but there are lots of words that are thrown together as compounds of other words.
Mhm.
Is there a similar challenge in German? I'm just curious, and a similar challenge that would be met with a similar technical approach, Carl?
There is, and when we developed support for German, what we found was that for the most part, we didn't have to deal with it in order to provide the functionality support that we do in other languages. What we've done is, in seeing it occurring in Chinese as well, we're going to be going back and saying, well, what extra information, what added benefit can we get by breaking those words apart? And one of the things that actually is in the release that we put out last night, 5.1.1, is taking hashtags on Twitter and identifying the individual words where they've been catenated together to say, okay, well, before, we wouldn't have been able to detect any sentiment out of hashtag I love Lexalytics, because it all looks like one glommed together word for us. Now we can say, okay, well, we can identify that there's actually 3 words in there. One of them is sentiment bearer. And so now we can extract more sentiment out of it.
What was it? There was a case when Margaret Thatcher died, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Mhm.
The hashtag, there was a confusing hashtag where people thought that some pop figure had died. What was it?
They thought that Cher died.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
because
Yeah.
Cher is
That
that Cher,
Cher,
something
something.
that Cher.
Yes.
Isn't
Jeez.
that some problem?
And exactly in that regard, when we first started playing with it, ID was one of the words that we would try to identify. So as you're working through it, you would find ID instead of I did. And so there were certain words that we wanted to blacklist because it was more important to get the shorter word or the longer word that was more common to occur. So yeah, so there are those edge cases that are going to exist as well.
But maybe the question about how you would break this up, sometimes the compound has a different meaning from the individual components, of course.
Right.
Right, so
That applies to
I say-
hashtags or German words or maybe this.
Yeah.
I suggested 2 words because I would think of Chinese people as adjective and
So it's a
noun.
migrant.
Yeah.
Right, but you could also think of it as Chinese as a plural common noun.
Mhm.
So, and as Liz said, as we're going through, we just have to pick one way or the other and derive whatever benefit we can from the choices we make.
I think that's the difference from German, is that in German, it's already tokenized for you, right? And that compound word maybe may have some small words, but that compound word generally identifies a specific concept that you can't read it 2 different ways.
Mhm. So what would be wrong is if we cut it off after zhong. So I think everyone can agree that would be a little weird. So those are the kinds of, so the first one is not really an error, it's just a choice you have to make. And then the second one I just said, that's probably more an error. I keep pressing the wrong button here. Okay. So now that you understand that a little bit, I think you'll maybe be able to understand more when we get to engrams and themes, etc. So I'm going to walk through a document in Salience to show what we can actually extract from it. Okay, so let's go back to that blog article we saw earlier. This one, it looks really complicated. I don't want to read that. It's a lot of numbers. Okay, so Salience can hone in on what topic this is about, okay? So this is concept topics. So Salience can figure out that, okay, this is primarily about economics and finance and banking. Okay, that's good to know. Very detailed sentiments, So now that we
sometimes
know
stories.
the
If you remember
content
the
domain,
cat
we can get a
mouse
summary of
story
the
yesterday. These
I
are
don't really
just
understand this in
two
English or
opposite
Chinese, so,
sentiment Chongmus. And
any finance buffs out there, I'm sure, may have a better idea. One thing to note here as well, again, differences in the languages that you really have to consider. So I had this set to a three-sentence summary. You can change that however you'd like. But notice how much longer the English is. I think that's even a smaller font, it might be. And notice also, it might actually be more than, actually I think I was able to do it in three like run-on sentences, but you tend to get these sentences in Chinese that in English are just so long and would just be ungrammatical if you don't actually break them up. So you'll notice, and if you think about the morphology, what I just said about that, you can imagine how we just have so much more of these little functional words that we have to throw in there, and so you get this longer summary most of the time, or longer translations. Okay, so we know this is about M2, broad money, supply, and yeah.
The English down below.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to just clarify a little bit where the English translation actually came from, and that Salience is providing the native.
Okay.
Chinese up top, but
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I'm providing this for you right now, but Salience is providing it just in Chinese. We don't attempt to do automatic translation. I spoke about this yesterday. It's just not good enough. But certainly, if you want to get an idea of what you're talking about, I plug things into Google all the time just to get, some keywords at least. But if you're looking for, really fluent, accurate translations that you can rely on, this I actually translated. It's not the most beautiful translation, but it's the best I could do. So, so Salience just provides the Chinese. Okay, so we can extract some of the main themes from this article. This is where it starts to get really exciting. Yay. Okay. So we have global money growth, the scale of central bank assets, transfer of financial innovation, global money supply and demand, broad money amount, scale of social financing, inflation risks. Okay, we're really getting a pretty decent idea of what this is about now. Again, we don't provide these translations, but hopefully you're working with content or with translators or content that you understand. Oh my goodness, sorry about that. Okay. And then how about the overall tone of the article? So is it positive or negative? And which phrases contribute to the overall sentiment of the document? So we do this the same way we do it for our other languages. We leverage the same technique. It's phrase-based. But of course, we use different sentiment dictionaries and different rules to extract those sentiment phrases. So here's a zoom in of part of that article. And here are some of the positive and negative words. So it understands also what happens when a word is negated. Okay, so we have 平衡, or 均衡, balanced. And we have 不, not. So 不均衡 is not balanced, and it's going to be negative, even though balance would have been positive before. So we have some context rules. And then we get our overall sentiment score like we do for other languages. Okay, it's pretty negative for a news article. Okay, so what else can Salience Chinese do? So we have n-gram frequency analysis. And this is where it's a little bit different for Chinese. So basically, we're looking at the character level. And this goes back to the segmentation issue. So it's much more informative to look at the way characters collocate as opposed to words. Because what you end up having are these lists of 1 gram, 2 grams, 3 grams, 4 grams that are all jagged, and it's like, well, why is that a 2 gram, and why is that, especially if you're not really sure why something was segmented the way it was. So it's much more, you get a different perspective as well when you can look at characters. So 1 grams are actually characters, which tend not to be words on their own, which is why I don't have the translation for a lot of them. But you get an overall idea. So this literally means gold. It tends to be part of money words. Rong is part of finance. This is part of the word for renminbi, which is the money that we use in China. Zi is like funds. Huo is goods. So these are all these meaningful characters that I was showing you earlier that we can sub in and out and to actually make words. So this can be very useful depending on the type of task you're looking at. This right here, you're going to see a lot. This is a functional character. It doesn't have much meaning. It just joins together modifying nouns to their base noun. So this is always one of the most frequent characters. We can also look at 2 grams. Okay, this is where we get a lot more words. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but modern Chinese is mainly bisyllabic, but you also get words that are 3 characters long and 4 character long Chengyus, but also some words. And then anything longer than that tends to be very compound nouns or foreign names, which are transliterated. So we stuck with 1, 2, 3, and 4 grams. Okay, so here we get more informative words. So we have China, society, money, data, USA, finance, supply and demand, inflation, total amount, scale, central banks. Okay, and then 3 grams. Not as many words here, but you still get renminbi, billion yuan, derivatives. Had to look that one up. The amount of supply and demand, inflation. Oh, that shouldn't be there. That's a bigram. But the other ones are just kind of segments of things that you can tell are part of bigger segments. So I didn't translate most of those. And then we get to 4 grams. Okay, so just because these are 4 characters long, first of all, we segment these as 2 words. So these are not necessarily chunky. And in fact, none of them are. So we have, but this tends to be the most informative. So we have financial innovation, money supply and demand, global money, bank loan, total finances, social finance, financial bubble, inflation risks, asset scales. So you can see how informative n-grams can be from a different perspective.
What are the size of font?
The sizes of the font? These are the top n-grams for that category. I can't remember if I actually correlated the size with the frequency, but that would have made sense, so I want to say yes, but it's not necessarily true. But these are certainly the top, top 20, top 15, top 20, yep.
Do we also get the offset?
Meaning just where they're located? Yes. Okay, and again, notice more words show up in 2 grams and 4 grams than they do in 1 grams or 3 grams. It's not always true, depending on the article, but it's always going to be a lot of 2 grams. So as you can see, we're able to understand a lot about this article without even having to read it. So I think that's really cool, especially for me. I actually had another presentation that I didn't want to bore you with, but when I go to actually read something in Chinese, especially if it's a novel, I'll use Salience on it to get some of the main themes, what I'm going to be reading about, and some vocab. So let's just go through one more article quicker than the last. This is a tech article. Okay, so concept topics. Okay, mobile, hardware, technology, software and internet, economics. There you see again, Android. So this is Google right here, and this is Android. Sometimes that's spelled out in English. And sometimes Android is in Chinese. Here's a summary. So what is late Apple co-founder Steve Jobs' most terrifying nightmare? It's an Asian manufacturer. It's very powerful. This is where we split it up into a lot more sentences, and it primarily uses Google Android's operating system, blah, blah, blah. So it's Samsung. So themes. Okay, so we have rival imitation, smartphone patents, tablet computers, operating system. And the sentiment, there are some positive phrases, like massive benefits, but there's more negative phrases like these ones, terror, uncertainty, fall into deadlock, suffer serious losses. So we get a negative sentiment score. And then 1 grams. So what's different here from the last one? Look to, this is this ping, which is part of the word for Apple, and xing, which is part of the word for Samsung. This is the word, a character, and it's part of the word for sue, like to sue someone. We have 2 grams. Okay, we're getting a better idea. So we have Samsung, we have mobile, lawsuit, distance, computer, Apple, intelligent, as in like usually AI intelligence. Okay, and then we have 3 grams. Again, not a lot of words here. The biggest one is jobs. Chubb was the name of Steve Jobs, not like careers. And then 4 grams. Sues Samsung, smartphone, first prosecution, Korean enterprise, fall into deadlock, tablet computer. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So in the future, we're going to have named entity extraction in August. We have themes right now, which we showed you, topics, summarization, sentiment at the document level, and then n-grams we talked about is at the character level. Yes, and if anyone wants to be a beta tester, please let us know, because we'd love to have some more feedback for we have a beta out right now, so please come talk to me or Carl or anyone at Lexalytics. And that's it. Any questions? Oh,
So,
okay.
one of the things I was, we don't have name entity extraction right now?
Not right now.
And, one of the things that was, I don't know if it was clear from that presentation, why there's such a challenge to do a name entity extraction, in Chinese. I found that interesting.
Sure.
Could you spend 30 seconds?
Sure. Probably the biggest thing, so in English, we have capitalization. So that's a huge clue. In Chinese, we don't have that. Also, word boundaries. So, and just other morphological clues. Yeah, but I'd say the biggest thing is capitalization. Yeah. Anyone else? Some of the easier things are actually foreign names. So if we actually have the English in there, but also if it's transliterated into Chinese. So we had Job's name, that just sounds foreign. So, or my name is sometimes transliterated as like what, Elisha B or something like that, weird. So you can capitalize on longer words that tend to have characters that are used for foreigners' names, like Dawei is David, although that's only 2 characters long. But so foreign names are easier, as well as Chinese names can be somewhat easy because there's a limited number of surnames, and they tend to be 2 to 3 characters long. But when you get to places and companies, that's where it gets, or organizations more so, that's where it gets kind of difficult. But yeah, we're working on that, so stay tuned. Anything else?